Someone you trusted completely, did something that changed how you see them. Maybe they went behind your back, told someone something you shared in confidence, took credit for your work, ended the friendship without a word, chose someone else after years of choosing you, looked you in the eye and lied, again and again. And you believed them because why wouldn't you? They were your person. And now you're sitting with something that doesn't have a clean name. It's not just anger, though the anger is real and it's right to feel it. It's not just sadness, though that's in there too. It's something more disorienting than either of those. It's the specific feeling of having your understanding of reality revised without your permission. Because betrayal doesn't just hurt you. It rewrites the past. Suddenly, every memory you have of that person has a question mark on it. Every conversation, every moment of closeness, every time you thought you were safe. Now you're going back through all of it asking, was any of it real? That's what makes betrayal different from other kinds of pain. A breakup is an ending. A job loss is a disruption. Even grief, as devastating as it is the loss of something that was real. Betrayal is the discovery that something you believed was real wasn't, or at minimum, wasn't what you thought. Here is what I also know. The way you respond to betrayal in the days, weeks, and months after it happens is going to define a chapter of your life. Not because of what the other person did, because of what you do next. And the Stoics, who dealt with betrayal at a scale most of us will never experience, who were exiled, framed, manipulated, and abandoned by the people closest to them, left behind a framework for exactly this moment. Not a framework for revenge. Not a framework for toxic positivity that tells you to wish them well and move on. A framework for something much more specific and much more useful. How to respond to betrayal in a way that keeps you, your character, your clarity, your sense of self, completely intact. How to be the person who comes out of this more themselves, not less. That's what this video is about. Let's go. Part 1. The story, Marcus Aurelius and the people who betrayed him. The emperor who was betrayed constantly, and what he wrote about it. I want to tell you about Marcus Aurelius, not the quote card version, not the philosopher king on a pedestal, but the actual man who sat down at night after brutal days and wrote in his private journal about what it felt like to be let down by the people around him. Because Marcus Aurelius was betrayed, repeatedly, by people he trusted, people he promoted, people he loved. And the way he processed it, in real time, on the page, with complete honesty about how hard it was, is the most useful account of betrayal and its aftermath that I've ever found anywhere. Let me give you the context first, because it matters. Marcus Aurelius became emperor of Rome in 161 AD. He did not want the job. He was a philosopher by temperament, a man who would rather have spent his life reading and writing than governing the largest empire in the world. But he took it, and he tried to do it well, with integrity, for 20 years. In those 20 years, he was betrayed by some of the people closest to him. His co-emperor, Lucius Verus, his brother in everything but blood, the man he shared power with, died in 169 AD after years of what many historians describe as a partnership of unequal effort. Marcus carried the weight of governance, while Verus pursued personal pleasures. He never publicly condemned him. He mourned him genuinely when he died. His general, Avidius Cassius, a man Marcus had trusted, promoted, and publicly praised as one of Rome's finest military minds, declared himself emperor while Marcus was still alive, launching a civil war based on a false rumor that Marcus had died. Think about that for a moment. The man Marcus had defended, elevated, praised to the Senate, tried to take his throne while he was still breathing. When the rebellion collapsed and Cassius was killed by his own soldiers, Marcus did something that stunned everyone around him. He ordered the letters that Cassius had written, the correspondence that named his collaborators, the senators and officials who had sided with the usurper, to be burned, unread. He did not want to know who had turned against him, not because he was naive, not because he was weak, because he understood something about himself and about power that most people never learn. Knowing who had betrayed him would change how he treated them, and he did not want his governance, or his character, to be determined by his wounds. That decision, burning the letters, is the most stoic act in Roman history that almost no one talks about. And it becomes even more powerful when you read what Marcus wrote in the meditations around this same period. He writes, "Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with meddling, ungrateful, violent, treacherous, envious, uncharitable men. All of these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil." Read that carefully. He is not saying, hope that good people show up. He is saying, assume that difficult people will show up. People who will be treacherous, envious, ungrateful, and be prepared for them before they arrive. This is not cynicism. This is what the Stoics called premeditatio, the deliberate anticipation of difficulty so that it cannot ambush you. Marcus was preparing himself every single morning to encounter betrayal, not because he expected everyone to betray him, but because when it happened, and it did happen repeatedly, he did not want to be destroyed by his surprise. And then there is one more passage in the Meditations that I think is the most honest thing Marcus ever wrote about being let down by someone he trusted. He writes, "When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not of the same blood or birth, but the same mind, and possessing a share of the divine. And so none of them can hurt me. No one can implicate me in ugliness. No one can implicate me in ugliness." That sentence is the entire Stoic framework for betrayal in 8 words. Let me explain what he means. Because if you take it at face value, it sounds like denial. It sounds like he's saying, what they did doesn't matter, I'm above it. He is saying something far more precise. He is saying, their actions are theirs. What they did lives in them. What I do in response, that lives in me. And I will not let what they did determine the quality of who I am. That is not denial of the pain. That is the most sophisticated understanding of agency in the face of betrayal that I have ever encountered. Their ugliness does not have to become yours. That is the question this entire video is built around. Before we leave the historical section, I want to add one more voice. Seneca, who was himself betrayed by Nero, the emperor he had spent decades advising and protecting, the man who eventually ordered his death, wrote something in his letters to Lucilius that I think is the most practically useful sentence on this entire topic. Omnia aliena sunt, tempus tantum nostrum est. Everything is alien to us. Only time is ours. In the context of betrayal, here is what he means. The other person's character, alien. Their choices, alien. The narrative they tell about what happened, alien. What other people think about the situation, alien. What is yours? How you spend the hours of your life from this point forward. Not as a consolation, as a directive. The time you spend in rage at what they did, in fantasies of revenge, in obsessive replaying of what happened, that time is yours. You are spending it. The question the Stoics always come back to is this the best use of what is yours? That question is not a reprimand. It is an invitation to reclaim your life. Part 2. The reframe. What betrayal actually reveals. 3 things you now know that you didn't know before. I want to offer a reframe before we get into the framework. Not to minimize what happened. Not to rush you past the anger, which is valid and which the framework will address directly. But because the reframe changes what you're looking at, and what you're looking at determines what you do next. Here is the reframe. Betrayal is painful. It is also information. Very specific, very clear, very valuable information that you did not have before. 3 pieces of it. Reframe 1. You now know something true about this person. The first piece of information is this. You now know something true about the person who betrayed you that you didn't know, or didn't want to know before. Not everything about them. Not that they're irredeemably bad, or that nothing you shared was real, but something specific and important. You know what they are capable of doing when the stakes are high enough, when the pressure is on, when it costs them something to be loyal to you. That is not a small thing to know. Most people spend years, decades, trying to figure out who someone really is. Betrayal tells you in an instant. The Stoics would say this is not a loss of information, it is a gain. You are operating with a more accurate map of reality now than you were before. Yes, the accurate map is harder to look at than the beautiful incorrect one. But navigating with an accurate map, even a painful one, is always better than navigating with a beautiful lie. Marcus Aurelius writes, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." He applied this to himself, but implicit in it is this: you can apply it to your assessment of others. If the truth about this person is that they did this, that is the truth. You are now required, by your own integrity, to update your understanding accordingly. Not with contempt, not with permanent condemnation, with accuracy. Reframe 2. You now know something true about yourself. The second piece of information that betrayal provides is harder to sit with, but it's the one that has the most power to transform you if you let it. Betrayal tells you something about yourself. Not that you deserved it, not that you caused it, not that you should have seen it coming. Something more useful than any of those things. It tells you what you are made of when the floor gives out. It reveals your defaults. When you found out, were your first instincts toward revenge, toward self-blame, toward withdrawal, toward urgency to fix it, toward telling everyone, toward telling no one. None of those defaults are wrong. They are information. They are the thing the Stoics called prohairesis, your faculty of choice, your will, your character as it actually operates under pressure as opposed to how you imagine it would operate in the abstract. Marcus Aurelius spent years cultivating his character in peacetime specifically so he could access it in crisis. He called this the discipline of desire, training what you want, what you reach for, what you do automatically when the ground shifts. Betrayal is a test of that cultivation, not a punishment, a test. And the test has value, not because it's fair, it isn't, but because what you learn about yourself under this kind of pressure is information you cannot get any other way. The question the Stoic framework asks at this point is not, why did they do this? It is, who do I want to be now that this has happened? Because that question, who do I want to be, is the one you actually have the power to answer. Reframe 3. You now have a clarity you didn't have before. The third piece of information is the most counterintuitive one. Betrayal creates clarity. Not immediately, not in the acute phase when everything is raw and the anger is loudest. But eventually, and often faster than people expect, betrayal burns away the ambiguity that was costing you more than you knew. Let me explain what I mean by ambiguity. In most relationships that eventually end in betrayal, there were signs. Small ones, maybe. Things that felt slightly off. Moments where you pushed a doubt down because you didn't want to deal with what it implied. Times you gave the benefit of the doubt to something that, in retrospect, didn't deserve it. That process, the ongoing management of doubt, the suppression of your own perception, the energy required to maintain faith in someone who was giving you reasons not to, is expensive. It costs you more than you realize. And after the betrayal, once the acute pain passes, many people report something unexpected: relief. Not relief that it happened, but relief that the ambiguity is over. Relief that the question they were carrying, can I trust this person, has been answered definitively. The clarity, once you can access it, is yours to use. Seneca writes, the body, in such cases, is of use only for the soul's instrument. Everything that has happened, the pain, the anger, the revelation, is material. It is the raw material of the next chapter. Betrayal handed it to you in the worst possible way, but it handed it to you. What you build with it is entirely up to you. Part 3, the Stoic Framework. 3 responses. 3 responses, not sequential steps. You will cycle through these in your own order, on your own timeline. But each of them addresses a specific thing that betrayal does to you. And each of them comes directly from the Stoic texts, not as abstract philosophy, but as practical instruction that I'm going to translate as directly as I can into what it looks like in your life right now. Response 1. The view from the judge's seat. Distinguish the act from the person. Marcus Aurelius had a practice that he describes repeatedly in the Meditations. He would mentally step back from a situation and view it the way a judge would view evidence, without the distortion of personal investment, without the noise of how he felt about it, looking only at what was actually there. He called this variations of catharsis, a kind of clearing, a stripping away of the narrative overlay to see the facts as they are. Applied to betrayal, this practice does something very specific and very important. It separates two things that betrayal causes us to fuse together. What this person did, which is a specific action at a specific time with specific causes and consequences, and what this person is, which is a complete human being whose entire identity you are at risk of reducing to the worst thing they've done. I want to be clear about why this distinction matters, because it is easily misunderstood. This distinction is not for their benefit. It is not about being fair to them or giving them grace they may not deserve. It is for yours. Because when you fuse a person entirely with their betrayal, when they become, in your mind, nothing but the thing they did to you, you give the betrayal a size that distorts your entire reality. It becomes the thing everything else is organized around. It colonizes your perception of the past, the present, and the future. The judge's seat practice pulls you back from that fusion. Here is what it looks like in practice. Sit somewhere quiet, take a breath, and try to describe what happened in the most factually neutral terms you can. Not, "They destroyed me," though it may feel that way. Not, "They're a monster," though the anger says so. What specifically did they do? At what point? What was the immediate impact on you? What are the actual consequences you're dealing with? This is not minimizing. Describe it as seriously as it is, but describe it accurately. What you will find when you do this is that the clear, factual description of what happened is almost always less overwhelming than the emotional narrative that surrounds it. The act is a defined thing with defined edges. The narrative about the act is infinite. It expands to fill whatever space you give it. The judge's seat is how you keep it the size it actually is. And then, only after you've done that, you ask the judge's question, what does this person's action tell me about them? Not everything, not forever, not irredeemably. What does this specific action, in this specific context, tell me about what they are capable of? And what, given that information, is the appropriate level of trust and proximity I extend to them going forward? This is not revenge. It is not even punishment. It is simply the act of updating your understanding of someone based on evidence that they themselves provided. The Stoics called this seeing clearly. You are not required to pretend you didn't see what you saw. Response 2. The discipline of desire. Choose your inner response. The second response addresses the thing that almost every person who has been betrayed struggles with most in the weeks after it happens, the obsessive replaying. The conversations in your head, the ones you had, the ones you wish you'd had, the ones you're preparing to have. The checking, their social media, their phone, their narrative to mutual friends. The fantasies, sometimes revenge, sometimes reconciliation, sometimes just, I want them to understand what they did. All of these are completely understandable, and all of them have something in common. They are directing your finite mental energy towards something that is outside your control. This is where Epictetus becomes the most useful voice in the room. He writes in the Discourses, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." In the context of betrayal, this is what that sentence means at ground level. What they did happened. It is now in the category of unchangeable facts. It lives there permanently alongside gravity and the past tense. Every unit of energy you spend wishing it hadn't happened, fantasizing about a world where it didn't happen, trying to retroactively undo it through conversation or confrontation. That energy is being spent on something that is categorically not yours to control. The discipline of desire is the practice of catching that outflow of energy, noticing when your attention has gone to the right column of Epictetus's ledger and deliberately redirecting it to the left. What can you actually do right now? Not about them, not about what happened, about your life as it actually is today. I want to be specific about what this looks like in practice, because stop ruminating is not useful advice. Everyone knows they should stop. The question is how. The Stoic technique, and I mean a specific, concrete practice, is what Marcus Aurelius called the present moment anchor. When you catch yourself replaying the betrayal, in that exact moment, you ask yourself one question: what is actually in front of me right now? Not tomorrow, not the conversation you're going to have, not the thing they're probably doing right now. What is actually in front of you, in this specific moment? A cup of coffee, a person who loves you, a task that needs doing, a body that needs to move or eat or sleep. You redirect to that, not forever, not pretending the betrayal didn't happen, for this moment, and then the next moment. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is the Stoic understanding that the present moment is the only place where action is possible, and that a life lived primarily in the past, rehearsing it, Event that cannot be changed is a life spent in a location where nothing you want to build actually exists. The obsessive replay is costing you present moments. The present is where your next chapter is being written. Every time you choose to be here rather than there, you are doing the most important thing available to you. Response 3. Amor Fati applied. What does this demand of you now? The third response is the one that requires the most time to reach, and it's the one that, when you do reach it, changes everything. We've talked about Amor Fati in this channel before, the Stoic concept of loving what is, of treating the circumstances of your life as the material you're working with rather than the obstacle standing between you and your real life. In the context of betrayal, Amor Fati does not mean love that they betrayed you. Be grateful for the experience. Everything happens for a reason. I cannot say this firmly enough. The Stoics would have no patience for that reading of their philosophy. What Amor Fati means, specifically, in this situation, is this. This has happened. It is now the ground you are standing on. What do you build from here? Marcus Aurelius writes, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it." He is describing a quality of character, not a feeling, not an attitude. A quality of character that receives what happens and uses it rather than being consumed by it. That quality is not automatic. It is not something you achieve by deciding to have it. It is something you practice, every day, in small decisions, until it becomes the way you operate. And the specific practice for Amor Fati after betrayal is this. Ask yourself, not immediately, but when you are ready, what does this situation demand of me? Not, what do I want to do in response? Not, what would feel satisfying? Not, what would make them understand what they did? What does this situation actually demand? It demands, probably, that you establish some clarity about your boundaries. It demands, probably, that you redirect the energy you were spending on this relationship into yourself, your work, your other relationships, your health, your growth. It may demand a conversation, a direct, clear conversation with the person about what happened and what the consequences are, not to punish them, to close the loop for yourself. It may demand that you simply leave, quietly, without drama, without a speech, because the situation no longer warrants your presence. It demands, certainly, that you do not let what happened to you determine what you become. That last demand is the Stoic one, that you do not let the worst thing someone did to you become the organizing principle of your life going forward. Because when that happens, when the betrayal becomes the story you tell about yourself, the reason for the choices you make, the lens through which you see all future relationships, the other person has not just hurt you once. They continue to hurt you, every day, for as long as you let the story run. Amor Fati is the decision to stop letting someone else's action write your story. That decision is yours to make, on your timeline, when you're ready, but it is available to you. Part 4, the practical guide, what to actually do. I want to end this video the same way I ended video 2, with something concrete. Because frameworks are important and philosophy matters, but there is a very real first week after betrayal that needs to be navigated, and navigating it well makes everything that follows easier. Here is the Stoic guide to the first 30 days. Days 1 to 3. Don't make irreversible decisions. The Stoics had a concept called acrisia, acting against your better judgment because your emotions are overriding your reason. They considered it one of the most dangerous states a person could be in. In the first 72 hours after a significant betrayal, you are almost certainly in some version of acrisia. The anger, the grief, the shock, they are all legitimate. They are not your best advisors. So the Stoic instruction for days 1 through 3 is very simple. Do not send the message you're composing. Do not make the call you're about to make. Do not post what you're drafting. Do not take any irreversible action. Not because you're wrong about what happened. You're probably not wrong. But because the version of you that exists in 10 days will have access to more information, including information about what you actually want, than the version of you that exists right now. Protect your future self's options. Write everything you want to say. Write it in a document that no one will ever see. Get it out. That is useful. It externalizes the internal storm. Don't send it yet. Days 4 to 10. Run the judge's seat exercise. When you are slightly more stable, when the acute shock has passed, and you can think in something closer to a straight line, Do the judge's seat exercise I described earlier. Write out what happened in factually neutral terms. What specifically occurred? What are the actual consequences? What do you now know about this person? Then ask the practical question, what response does this situation require from me? Not what would feel satisfying. What does the situation actually require? This is the question that distinguishes a Stoic response from a reactive one. The reactive response is driven by what happened. The Stoic response is driven by what is needed. Those are often different things. By the end of day 10, you should have some clarity on what conversation, if any, you need to have. What boundaries, if any, need to be established or enforced. What practical changes, in your situation, your proximity to this person, your shared resources or relationships, need to happen. Not all of them need to happen immediately, but you need to know what they are. Days 11 to 21. Apply the discipline of desire. This is the period where the obsessive replay tends to peak, when the shock has worn off but the wound is still fresh, and your brain is doing its threat detection overdrive thing. This is where the present moment anchor becomes a daily, sometimes hourly, practice. Every time you catch yourself in the replay, what is actually in front of me right now? And then, this is the addition I want to make to what we covered in the framework section, build something. Not something related to the betrayal. Not something pointed at the person. Something for yourself. A project. A habit. A relationship you've been neglecting. A skill you've been meaning to develop. A part of your life that has nothing to do with what happened. Seneca writes, "If you wish to put off all worry, assume that what you fear may happen is certainly going to happen." He is talking about finishing the catastrophe, which we covered in video 1. But there is a second half to that instruction that he makes elsewhere. Once you've finished the catastrophe and confirmed you can survive it, turn your energy toward building. The building is the antidote to the replay, not because it distracts you, because it gives you a direction, and a direction is the most Stoic thing there is. Days 22 to 30. Ask the Amor Fati question. At the end of the first month, sit somewhere quiet with a journal or just with yourself, and ask, what does this situation demand of me now? Not in terms of the other person, in terms of your life. What needs to change? What needs to be built? What do you want the next chapter of this life to look like? Not in spite of what happened, but as the person who went through it and came out intact. Marcus Aurelius, near the end of the Meditations, writes something that I want to leave you with. He writes, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." There comes a point, in every betrayal, in every hard thing, where the analysis has gone on long enough, where the processing has served its purpose, where the question of what to do has been answered, at least provisionally, and then the only thing left is to do it. Not to perform recovery, not to announce that you're fine, not to rush past the grief, but to move, deliberately, in the direction of who you want to be, and let that movement be the response. That is what the Stoics meant by living well. And after a betrayal, living well is the most complete response available to you. I want to say something directly before we close. If you came to this video because you are in the middle of something real, because someone you trusted did something that has genuinely changed you, I want to acknowledge that before I wrap up with Stoic wisdom. What happened to you is not okay. The anger you feel is not a problem. It is an accurate response to something that deserved a different response from the person who gave you this one. You are allowed to feel it. You are allowed to sit with it. You are allowed to take the time you need. The Stoic framework is not a tool for bypassing that. It is a tool for eventually, on your timeline, not anyone else's, carrying it without being defined by it. Marcus Aurelius burned those letters not because he didn't care what was in them. He burned them because he knew that knowing would cost him something he wasn't willing to pay. His character, his clarity, his ability to govern with something other than his wounds. You may not be an emperor, but you have the same choice available to you. What are you willing to pay? And what are you unwilling to let them take? 3 things to take with you. The judge's seat. Describe what happened accurately. Update your understanding of the person based on evidence. Don't fuse them entirely with the worst thing they've done. The discipline of desire. Every time the replay starts, what is actually in front of me right now? Then build something. Amor Fati. What does this situation demand of me? Then do that thing. Not to perform recovery, to actually move. In the next video, we're going to take the Stoic framework into one of the most searched and least understood topics in this space, The dichotomy of control, applied specifically to anxiety. Not the theory, the practice. What it actually looks like to use Epictetus's most important idea on the days when your brain is running worst-case scenarios you cannot turn off. If that's useful to you, subscribe. Leave a comment. Tell me, what's the hardest part of dealing with betrayal for you? The anger? The replay? The not knowing how to respond? I read all of them, and sometimes the most useful thing is just naming it. I'll see you in the next one.